Hey guys, it's Kevin with my review for Ghostbusters Afterlife. And this film basically takes place roughly 32 years after the events of Ghostbusters 2, and we center on this single mother named Kelly and her two children, and she is the daughter of Egon Spengler, who has recently passed away, and basically after her and her children face this eviction notice, they end up moving to this small town in Oklahoma, where basically they discover, her father's connection to the Ghostbusters and his secret legacy, and this really leads them to maybe start to rethink the way they really look at their father or grandfather overall. Ghostbusters Afterlife, I was very excited for this film. Now, I'll be honest, Ghostbusters is a great film. It is a film that I very much do enjoy a lot. I think it's very entertaining. I think it's endlessly quotable, and I think it's very much a product of the 80s for sure, but I really don't think they've ever had a good sequel. I'm not a big fan of Ghostbusters 2. I think it has some good elements to it, but overall, I find it relentlessly boring, and once it gets to the third act, I think it just gets completely ridiculous. And the 2016 film, if you remember, I at first was a fan of that. I very much soured on it since then. I just am not a huge fan of that film at all. It really just didn't feel very much like Ghostbusters, and so when it came to this movie, this really seemed like the kind of sequel that had passion, that felt like it could really, remind us why we enjoy that original film as much as we really do, especially in the capable hands of someone like Jason Reitman. I really felt like this film was going to be something special, and I have to say, for me, this very much did deliver. Ghostbusters Afterlife, I can finally say, is a good sequel to Ghostbusters. In fact, it's a pretty damn great one. This is such a fantastic blend of the old and the new, what made the film great, but what made that original film great, but also adding this new adventure sort of element that I think really makes it something special. We're just going to get into it right now, starting off with the cast here. And when it comes to Ghostbusters Afterlife, I think that's something that very much does make that original film. That cast is absolutely iconic. Everyone really does kill it in their roles. And I have to say, in terms of this film, I think that the acting is very strong here, especially when it comes to Mckenna Grace, who, look, I've already praised her a lot in various films, but I really think this is probably one of her strongest performances yet as the character of Phoebe. Phoebe is this very quirky character that, yes, can be very weird, but she also is highly intelligent. She has this love for science, and so you already see how this is something that she's very much into, and when she starts to realize more of what's going on, she really starts to become intrigued, and it sort of leads her down this heroic path, and you really do root for her as a result. I think Mckenna Grace really does solidify herself as a star in this movie. Again, I already really did love her in previous films, but I think here, we really are just reminded of how much of a star she really is, how much she really can lead a film very well. She has so much, she just has so much passion, she has so much energy, so much charisma, and I really love what she ended up bringing to this character overall. She had all the quirks that I think this character really needed to have, but never tried to become too over the top. This still feels like a very grounded and lived-in performance, and I really love what she ended up doing overall. I think she alone is enough a reason to watch this movie, but also really great here, and I'm so happy to say that we have this actress in a mainstream film, and she's giving an amazing performance, is Carrie Coon, who plays Callie Spengler, gives a really emotional performance here. This is a character that has gone through a lot in her life. She's doing her best to raise her kids, but she also has a bit of resentment towards her father. They weren't exactly on the best of terms, and you can really see how this is affecting her, the personal stakes that she has with everything that's going on. I really loved what she ended up doing in this film. I think she gave a very strong performance here. And I mean, Carrie Coon is such an amazing actress, and it was just really great to see her in a role like this. It's a bit more understated than some of her other performances, and a bit more subtle for sure, but I think overall she really does kill it here. Finn Wolfhard is also really great as Trevor. I really enjoyed his performance in this film. But the other big standout for me, I have to say, is someone I have not seen before in Logan Kim, who plays this character of Podcast. This is the kind of character that could get really annoying. His entire character is that he is obsessed with, there's a reason he's called Podcast, because, well, he's obsessed with listening to them. And with the wrong actor, this could really become a very grating performance. But Kim just has this likability to him and this charm to him that I really just can't explain, but every time he came on screen, I really enjoyed his character. I think he has very strong chemistry with Mckenna Grace. I think they work very well together, and I really enjoyed his role in this film. I think he did a really great job. Celeste O'Connor was also very strong here, but Paul Rudd as well is just such a highlight throughout this entire movie. Look, he pretty much is playing Paul Rudd, yes, but Paul Rudd is just such a likable actor. You just can't help but love what he's really doing here. I think that he was a huge standout whenever he's in this film, as is everyone. I think the cast overall here, everyone seemed like they were having a lot of fun. No one really seemed like they were half-assing this movie at all, and that's something that really does keep you, just so swept into everything that's going on here. All right, but now let's get into the directing and the writing, because that is another huge standout of this film for sure. Jason Reitman's directing is fantastic here. I think he did such an excellent job of taking what's worked before, but also putting his own spin on it. And what I mean by that is that this film is still very zany. It can be very comical. There's one scene especially. It involves Walmart, and oh my god, it is easily one of the funniest things I have seen all year. I loved what they ended up doing with that scene. I think the comedy is very consistent here. There's a lot of great jokes in this film. Like I said, the Podcast character especially, I really enjoy what they did with him, but he also adds this sense of wonder and almost this adventure type element to it. A lot of people have compared this film to like Steven Spielberg movies, and I don't think that's a bad comparison at all, because it definitely has that type of feel to it. This feels like the kind of family film that you would watch like back in the 80s. It very much does seem like that kind of movie. It feels like Reitman, not only is a fan of his father's original film, but he also is a fan of like 80s adventure films, and he really does implement that very well here. I think that adds this sense of heart, it adds this sense of fun to the film, and I think that's something that works really well. And the other reason that I think this film works so well is that there is a sense of passion here. It feels like there is someone that generally cares about this story. He wants to see this through in the best way that he possibly can, and I really do think Reitman was the best possible choice to direct this film. I really love what he ended up doing here. I never thought he got too over the top when it came to the nostalgia elements. I'll talk about that a little bit when it comes to the writing, but overall, I was very impressed by his directing here. But now let's get into the screenplay, because that's something I've heard a lot of people complain about. I've heard a lot of people say that this movie is a bunch of nostalgia and not much else, and I don't really buy into that at all, because I think something this film does a really great job with is earning that nostalgic elements. And there's a whole film that precedes it before we get to those more, those things that you want to see, those things that you want to hear. This film isn't just reference after reference. It is, for the most part, telling its own story. We're focusing on these characters, some of which aren't that connected to this. They don't know a lot of what's very much going on here, but they want to know more. Phoebe especially is extremely connected to this when she figures out what's going on. She's always, thought of her grandfather as this very terrible man that was just neglectful towards his family, didn't really care that much about his family, but she's always kind of seen the good in him, and you can see as this film goes on, you can really understand why. You can understand, the connection that she has to all of this, and why she cares so much about this tech, why she cares so much about hunting down ghosts. It's a little bit more than just wanting to save the world. There's a bit more of an emotional drive that she has, and you can understand why that's so important to her, because a lot of people just don't respect her. She is very much looked at as the weird kid that's into science, and you can see this is something that really makes her feel like she has a purpose, and that's what really makes you latch onto Phoebe as a character. I think overall, that's just such a rock-solid lead character, and I thought they did some really great work with her. But then, like I said, the Podcast character as well complements her very nicely, because he is the type of outrageous and ridiculous character that we really do need. His entire character is is that he pretty much is just like obsessed with like, you know, ghost hunter type podcasts and things like that, and so he's constantly referencing them throughout this film. And again, that's something that could get very annoying, but they always try to do something different with it. There's always clever ways that he ends up referencing this stuff, but it also feels like he himself is a fan of what's going on. You know, he has studied this for a while, and you really do buy into it, and I think they did a really great job when it came to the writing of his character. But also, you know, like I said, Carrie Coon's character is someone that I very much was intrigued by in this film, because she's someone that is very resentful towards her father. She doesn't really look at him in a positive light, and you can see how this has really hurt her in a sense. She feels like she's not the best mother. She is constantly comparing herself to him, trying to make sure that she doesn't turn out that way, and I really loved what they ended up doing with her character as a result. I think you really do feel connected to her, so they do a good job. Even Paul Rudd's character, yes, he is just kind of this teacher that likes to show very, let's just say, avant-garde type films. He does not show the kind of movies to kids that you normally would show. His methods are very unorthodox in that way. But again, you latch onto his passion. You love his energy. You love the genuine respect he has for Phoebe, the genuine interest he has in all of this. You can't help but latch onto that. And so I think the characters here are very likable, and the mission that they're going on, yeah, it can be a bit repetitive. Yes, that is something that I have heard people complain about, is that we're dealing with the same stuff here. But again, I think the film very much does earn it, because it really does take the time to get you there. For a while, it really is just this story about seeing these characters rediscover all of this technology and how they can use it to their advantage and things like that. I think that's something that this film does a really excellent job with. And then as we get later into the film, that's when it slowly starts to incorporate a lot more of the nostalgic elements, a lot more of the stuff that you associate Ghostbusters with. It really starts to get more into that here, and I think it overall earns that very well. I never felt like it was overbearing. I never felt like they were doing too much with it. It felt like it just naturally made sense when it came to the premise of this movie. So I really don't agree with the complaint that this movie just like shoves nostalgia in your face, because it felt genuine to me. This didn't feel like a movie that was just corporate, that they just made because they needed to do something with the Ghostbusters property. It felt like there was genuine love put into this, and I think it really did shine throughout the screenplay. So I think they did a really excellent job with that here. And like I said, I mean, this movie is also very funny. There's a lot of scenes here that very much did have me in stitches, whether it's something that Paul Rudd says or something they do with some of the creatures. I think overall they did a lot of fun stuff here, and I really enjoyed what they did to this film. But it also works as, I think, a really great tribute, not just to Ghostbusters, but to the late Harold Ramis. You know, obviously he did pass away in 2014, and you can just see the kind of love that this film has for him. What they ended up doing for him, I thought was generally really sweet, and there was a lot of stuff they did that I wasn't really expecting, but I thought worked really well when it came to the Egon Spengler character. They dive a lot more into what he really has done since the events of Ghostbusters, and I thought that all worked out very well here. I really enjoyed what they ended up doing in terms of the writing with this film. The cinematography is also very good here. A lot of the effects are practical for the most part, and they don't look too CGI in that way. When it comes to the characters that you're used to seeing, like, say, you know, like, say the character of Zool or the Stay Puft Marshmallow Men, it still looks tangible. It still looks like it fits within the universe. Yes, it's a bit more updated. Yes, it's a bit more CGI, but it all feels like it fits in very well. There's a really great scene when they're first testing out this technology, and I really just love the look and feel of everything. I thought the cinematography just worked really well here. Again, it gives you that sort of adventure feel. It's one of those films you can't take your eyes off of, because there's just so much spectacle going on in the screen. But again, the film isn't just spectacle. I think the cinematography overall reflected that very well. But the score that Rob Simonson does as well, it is just absolutely incredible here. It really represents that adventure type feel that, like I said, I think the movie is going for. I think that's going to keep people entertained. I think it's one of those scores that is definitely going to be memorable with this movie. It keeps you invested. It just heightens the fun of everything. And I think overall they did a really great job when it came to the score here and the editing. Yes, this film is 2 hours long, but to be honest, I never really felt the length. I think there were some moments that dragged here and there, but overall I was very invested in what was going on. I never felt like the film was going on for too long. I really did feel those 2 hours flew by overall. But I will say this film is still not perfect. There are a few things that do bring Ghostbusters Afterlife down overall. I think really the main thing, I talked about how the nostalgic elements, those don't bother me because, again, I think the film very much does earn them versus other films where it just feels like they are just trying to rely on nostalgia. They are being a little too overly reliant on their nostalgia. This film very much does earn it because it really is only that third act that incorporates all of the nostalgic elements that you're looking for, that you're expecting to see in a Ghostbusters film. It's not the entire movie. A lot of the movie is them trying to get us to latch onto these new characters, which the film is generally successful with, aside from one character. Finn Wolfhard's character, Trevor, isn't bad in this movie. I don't think he's a bad character or anything. Finn Wolfhard does give a really fun performance, but there just isn't a lot for him to do in this film. He has this story. He has this subplot with Celeste O'Connor's character and how he really likes them and he wants to get to know, the character of Lucky better, but they never really do much with that relationship. It feels like they kind of start up something and then they just kind of stop because you just have to get to this adventure. And I just felt overall his character, he needed a little more going on with him. He needed a little bit more of a connection to all of this because at the end of the day, it really just feels like the only reason he is like super invested in this mission is because of who it concerns and what's really going on. And I just felt like he needed a bit more of a story because we really don't know that much when it comes to his character, and I wanted to see a bit more with him. Also, I do think that the third act of this film, while I really did appreciate a lot of the nostalgia, there's one thing that they did that I think that just felt a little too on the nose. It's like, okay, I get what you're going for there, but I think you could have redone this a little bit differently. I think it feels a little bit far-fetched at points, but I won't lie, it's something that I generally really did enjoy, that I really can't complain all that much, so it's not really something that overall bothered me. So again, while those nostalgia elements are there, I don't think it in any way ruins the movie. I don't see it as a detriment to the film. I honestly see it as a strength because this film is generally honoring what worked about that original, but also trying to expand it and do something different and add this different sort of tone to it, which I think it is very successful with. And without spoiling too much, the ending of this movie generally is very emotional, and it doesn't feel forced in that way. It feels like this really satisfying emotional ending, and I thought overall they did a really strong job with it. And yeah, there's a lot of words I would use to describe the last act of this movie, but soulless is very much not one of them. This film has a genuine heart and a genuine spirit to it, and I think that's what makes this film much more endearing and also makes me forgive a lot of what would normally anger me in movies like this. I think it's because there was passion put into it, but again, the film does earn it. It never really loses sight of its story. I think the story still does come first, and I think that's what overall impressed me about this film, is even when you have a lot of nostalgic elements and a lot of references going on, it never really loses sight of its character. It never really loses sight of its characters, and I think that is something that overall, really impressed me about this film. Overall, Ghostbusters Afterlife, I think, is a lot of fun. It does a great job of combining the elements of the original that really did work, but also trying to add this new sense of adventure and wonderment that I think really makes it to be a very fun blockbuster. It's got a standout performance from Mckenna Grace, who continues to show just how promising of an actress she can really be, but it also great performances from Carrie, Coon, and Paul Rudd, and Logan Kim, all of which are a lot of fun in this movie. I can understand if some people are annoyed with its more nostalgic elements, but for me, I just couldn't help but get swept up in just the fun of this movie, the passion that was in here, the genuine energy that was put into this. I very much do see this being a successful film. If they want to continue on from here, I am very much down for. The fact that I can say we finally have a good Ghostbusters sequel, something that I could very much see myself returning to, something that I do want to see more of, something I did generally have a good time with, that I do think respects that original film very well, but also doesn't try to just rehash it, tries to do something different. I think that overall is something that's very special, and because of that, I really hope we're able to see more. Overall, I really had a great time when it comes to Ghostbusters Afterlife. It doesn't always tie things up in the most satisfying way. I think there are some characters they could have dived a bit deeper into, but overall, I really can't complain here all that much. This is just such a fun film that I really think is way better than it had any right to be, especially in terms of the directing. Jason Reitman just did such a fantastic job when it came to this film, really giving the film the passion that I think it really does deserve. So overall, I am going to give Ghostbusters Afterlife an A-. But over, guys, in my review of Ghostbusters Afterlife, then most guys saw this and we're all left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.